Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 69 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and in this episode, we are going to continue on our series preparing for the match. And we've got guest coming on, John Markwell. John has been in the industry for a really long time, has written lots of articles, has helped set up and run the ASC or Allegheny Sniper Challenge. Big Varmint hunter, great guy, and also runs a legendary match. And so I thought it was a great opportunity to bring him on and have him share with you some great experiences, as well as some tips and tricks to get you most from the matches that you're attending. Also, I'd like to throw out there, stick around to the end of the show because we have another big giveaway coming up. So we have a big giveaway that's going to happen New Year's Eve. Stick around towards the end of the podcast for that big announcement. And also, we do want to give a big thanks to our sponsors here at the show. We have Krieger barrels as well as MDT Krieger. They make some of the best cut rifled barrels on the market. They also have in stock and ready to ship barrels at KriegerDirect.com. And then also they have an online inventory that you can go to that has a lot of extra barrels that they post up randomly. So if you're in the need of a barrel, and let's face it, waiting 4, 5, 6 months for a custom-made barrel can be a pain, go over to KriegerBarrels.com or KriegerDirect.com and get your barrel picked out today. Also, don't forget about MDT. MDT makes one of the greatest chassis on the market, great sponsor of the show. And we always tell guys shooting factory rifles, if you want to shoot better, get a better stock that fits you properly and is designed to do the job that you are asking it to do. So stop over to mdttac.com. That's mdttac.com. So it's time to get into a great interview with Mr. John Markwell. So without further ado, here we go. John, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the podcast here, and looking forward to talking to you about match shooting and shooting in general. So I have with me John Markwell. John helped set up the Allegheny Sniper Challenge. He's been in shooting pretty much his entire life. Just to give a little brief introduction to what I know, and then I'll let you chime in, John, but you probably spent more time in the outdoors than most people that I know. I mean, from rock climbing to guiding, trips down the Colorado River or participating in those and helping in elk camps and all the things that you've done. But where we connected the first time was you had helped set up the Allegheny Sniper Challenge. So in our series here, we're trying to get the point of view of match directors as well as some competitive shooters, and this is called Preparing for the Match. And I couldn't think of anybody better to bring on as a first guest as far as someone who set up matches and run them and have the experience that you have than you. So, John, thank you so much for coming on to the show and helping us.
You're welcome, Jamie. It'll be a pleasure to talk to you.
To the viewers that don't know, I mean, you helped organize and set up the Allegheny Sniper Challenge, and that's got quite a history. When did that particular match start? And can you give everybody a little brief history on the ASC and where it came from and sort of why you started it?
Well, yeah, it's like a lot of other things in my life. It was a really good idea that kind of got out of control. Myself and a friend of mine, Rob Haught, we used to work with Ken Hackathorn doing some training stuff, and I did a lot of the long gun stuff. And through that, Rob and I started traveling around and shooting some of the early sniper rifle matches that way predated PRS. And in the process, we found that a lot of these matches, you're reading stuff on the internet, which I'm not a big fan of, but you would read stuff and you'd figure out who some of the guys were that were posting on some of the websites. Back then it was Sniper Country instead of the Hide. And you're kind of going like, well, wait a minute. I competed against you guys at, Fort Meade or out at Storm Mountain or wherever, and didn't, performance that I saw in a lot of cases did not match up with what you read on the internet, which doesn't surprise me one bit. So anyway, we decided, you know what, we're going to put on a shooting match. And basically the whole goal of ASC was to put on a match that was a field shooting match, not a flat range match, Nothing like PRS today, which is essentially speed shooting of plates with a bolt gun. It was a truly practical match from field positions on unknown distance targets with limited rounds. And especially the unknown distance thing just killed people because we required initially that all the targets be milled by the shooter, no electronics whatsoever. And we eventually changed that because of time considerations, a bunch of other stuff. But anyway, yeah, ASC was essentially a field shooting exercise, and it initially drew a pretty good bunch of folks from the other matches that we would attend. Well, unfortunately, a lot of them got their hat handed to them, and we didn't see a lot of them after the first few times. They're kind of going like, whoa, this is a little different, because first of all, you only get 1 or 2 shots per target. And it was a very humbling experience, and it was all shot on a big farm here in West Virginia, up in the mountains, and we had no wind flags. Like I say, unknown distances. We shot rain or shine, which sorted out a lot of people. Once the weather hit, a lot of folks would just bag it and leave. So it was essentially a way different kind of match than a lot of stuff that was going on at the time, and it remains to this day an incredibly different match compared to what you see on outdoor TV and stuff with PRS and that stuff. It's essentially still a field shooting exercise, and quite frankly, we have a really, really fun bunch of people who come to shoot it. The match has almost a cult following, and we've got a waiting list that's incredible. I mean, if you want in on the ASC, it's like, basically, I tell people good luck. My buddy Rod takes care of that registration stuff, and we could run a match every weekend if we wanted to really turn it into work, which we don't want to do.
And what year did you start the ASC? I mean, what years did they start really kicking off? I mean, I know you did some stuff informally, but how long's the match been running?
I think it was like in 2004, or maybe a little earlier. I mean, it's been going 15, 16, 17 years, something like that.
I know from someone who met you through ASC that I still tell people today that it's probably my favorite place to shoot on the planet, and that I learned more about my own personal capabilities there and my own shortcomings than any other place that I've ever shot. I mean, for me, it's like Pebble Beach with a rifle. I mean, it is the ultimate playground to really test you and your equipment. And I remember hiking all the hills and carrying all of your equipment and all the really cool stages that you guys set up. So, yeah, if anybody listening, if you ever really want to shoot a great match, I mean, I think it's legendary. And I tell people all the time at our shooting school here, it's my favorite place to shoot on the planet. And, I've learned so much there that it's just amazing. And even from like talking with you and all the other shooters and competitors, you really do get quite a different group, or, you get people from all over the country, but a lot of different backgrounds too. It's not uncommon to see people that are active duty military, or just from all different types of shooting backgrounds.
Yeah, we get, like you say, we get a fair number of active duty military people. We get law enforcement people, both local and federal agencies. There's a fair number of industry folks that come shoot. I know we have one buddy who works for FN, and he's to the point now that he says that's the only match he shoots. He just sets aside that weekend. He says it's a great, it's the best. He calls it the best match in the country, and I would question that because there are some really good matches I hear about out west. I've never been to them, but there are some pretty cool matches out there. But it's a different venue. I mean, there aren't many places where you can shoot east of the Mississippi, at least, that has not only the variety of shots, the angles, both up and down, as well as wonderful scenery. I mean, it's a great place to spend a couple days. It
is. And if anybody wants to see some of that, I mean, you can stop over. We have our King of the Mountain down there that we hold once a year, and you can see some of the pictures, and I think we might even have some video of it. But yeah, you can just sit back and eat lunch and you can never get enough of it. At least I can anyway.
Yeah, well, that, and they can look up, at ascmatch.com. There is a website, and there's a bunch of photos on there of the terrain and people shooting and whatever. But it'll give people an idea of what we do and what the terrain's like. And like I say, it's a different kind of match, and people need to, you prepare differently for our match than you do a lot of other matches. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and to go right into the match stuff, and I think this is really something that's sort of priceless to other shooters, is to hear from match directors and people that set these things up. When you're preparing for this type of match, or I almost consider it like how you would prepare for a hunt or really like a deployment. I mean, you're taking a lot of equipment, you're not equipment based, but you've got to take stuff that you need, like weather-wise. But if you're giving someone advice as to like you set up all of these stages and you've got all of these different targets, what should the shooter be thinking about, or what advice can you give them to say, hey, preparing for the match, these are key things that we see people struggle with all the time when they're getting set up on the stages or they're getting out in the environment, not really knowing what they're getting into or prepared for?
Well, first of all, here in West Virginia in the mountains, we do the match in both the spring and the fall, and weather is a huge consideration. We have had matches in May where we've experienced snowstorms, and people are out there in shirt sleeves and don't have adequate clothing to stay warm. The other huge thing, one of my pet peeves, is people not being organized, not being prepared to get to a position, to a firing position, get your gear together, build a position, and range a target if necessary, or you get the range. We give them to them now pretty much, but being able to basically just get their act together and get a shot off in a reasonable amount of time. And I'll give you an example. I used to do a shot that I called gear management, and a lot of the traveling from position to position is on foot. Some of it we haul people around. But I did gear management as my first or second shot of the morning with my group. We always split the field into two different groups, and with my group, I did this gear management shot, and it was really fun. We would position everybody, and we did it by teams of two. You had to pair up with somebody, and we would give the instruction like, okay, we're going to go walk back here. We did it back by the silo on the farm. Everybody stays behind the silo, and I brought them out to a firing point, 2 people at a time. And I'd say, okay, here's the drill. Do you see that target hanging in the tree out there? And they'd go, yeah. I go, okay, this is your mission. I said, you have, from this position, each of you to range and engage that target in a timely manner with one shot. And they'd kind of look at you like, that's pretty simple. I go, yeah. I said, here's the deal. You've got 1.5 minutes, and the time starts now. And it was amazing to watch the scrambles because people did not have their gear organized. And all of it was in their pack. I mean, a guy might have a Everly stock pack with his rifle and all that stuff in it. Well, he had no clue where anything was. And so they're scrambling around trying to get together, to get their shit together, so to speak, and get off a shot in 1.5 minutes. And honestly, half the people could not do it just because they weren't organized.
Yeah, they couldn't find their equipment. I actually...
they had no... we're something simple like, where's my magazine for my bolt gun, which is another pet peeve of mine. But anyway.
What about the gear management? I mean, what's some advice you could give guys is to really make sure that they're squared away, or just food for thought for that? Because it's big to the hunting scene as well. Like, I've gone on hunting trips where guys are dumping out their backpacks while the animal's standing at 400 yards away looking at us.
Oh, not even dumping out their backpacks. I mean, you talked to Brock, my son, a while back about the whole hunt thing, and there are horror stories from people who have guided hunters because the hunters don't have a clue about how to organize their gear, and it's the same getting ready for a match. I mean, if assuming that you've got, most matches everybody hauls a pack around, and you should organize that pack so that all your stuff is in the same place all the time. Your magazine's one place. If you've got a spotter and a tripod, which a lot of people don't carry anymore because the range staff does that, but anything that you might need, your short bipod or your tall bipod, all of that stuff needs to go in a spot where you know where it is and you can access it in a reasonable amount of time, so that you're not holding up everybody else.
Yeah.
Simple things like loading your rifle. Like, you talk about being organized, this is another one of my pet peeves. If you've got with our match, if you've got a shot where you've got 2 shots maximum, you load 2 rounds in your rifle. And that seems to be only common sense. But you'd be surprised how many people will load 1 round in the gun, assuming they're going to get a first round hit. And then when they miss it, like, oh my God, I got to get another round out of my pocket or whatever. Load the gun. They have a capacity on firearms for a reason. Use it. You can always take the bullets out, but it takes time to dig one up someplace and put one in.
That's right. What about you just keep going with the gear management part? Do you find less is better, or do you find like when you start looking, because you get the opportunity to see 60, 80, 90 people shoot a stage and how all of them sort of approach it differently. Do you find that some of them less is better, or equipment based, or just organization? So is it the guy that has the most tools, or is it the guy that has less tools and can use them better, or just really good organization?
Well, I'd say, first of all, good organization is always going to win out. But also, if you watch folks shoot, again, our match, generally speaking, the guys with the least amount of stuff are the most experienced. And I use the analogy of climbing. I spent 30 years of my life involved in the rock climbing business. And the best climbers in the world don't necessarily carry the most gear. They carry the least gear. So they're efficient, they can move fast, and they're light, light on their feet. And same with shooting. If the least stuff you can get by with adequately, the better off you are. Learn to use the minimum.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't need 14, pillow bags off of your arms and all that stuff so you look like an overgrown bumblebee. You watch a guy who shows up with 1 bag and knows how to use a sling maybe on his rifle, which is really important. It makes a huge difference if you can simplify your life without trying to dick around with a whole bunch of different stuff.
Yeah, I agree, and I think one of the shortcomings to new shooters is they get dependent on all of this extra equipment. They really don't know how to shoot without it, or they feel they need it to make the shot. And like Brock is a great example. Like I never get tired of watching your son Brock put a sling on and shoot. You're shooting targets 600-700 yards with a sling. I just sat there in total fascination and awe on the skill set it takes to do that. But I always think back that, well, there's a guy that you give him a bipod or something else to get sturdier. That shot's easy. I mean, he doesn't need it.
Yeah, well, exactly. And bear in mind, Brock grew up, he grew up in a gun family, obviously, but he grew up learning to shoot with a sling. I mean, he grew up shooting in the field. He never, ever engaged in any target sports, so to speak, here in the mountains. I mean, it wasn't available. And, he didn't get interested in shooting targets per se until we got all wrapped up into the long range shooting thing years ago. Mm-hmm. And like to give you an example on Brock, the first piece of steel on Allegheny Mountain was set up when he was 8 years old. Okay, I put a 12 by 12 plate out at 200 yards up on Allegheny where there was always a crosswind, so Brock could learn to shoot in the wind, and that started when he was 8 years old. So that gives him a little bit of a heads up.
Yeah, a little advantage on the practice side.
Right, but the same with shooting a sling with a sling, and he spent much of his youth, Lord love West Virginia and rural lifestyle. He spent much of his youth running around in these mountains with a .22 rifle, and learning how to shoot from field positions, and that entails not using a bunch of junk. It just entails being smart and learning to use natural features and like I say, learning to use a sling. Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty important thing.
When a new shooter's trying to start out at a match or get into match shooting, for say, what do you think is important for them to start training? Like, where should they be focusing their effort? Or, like, could you get it from the perspective of the match director and the guy setting up the matches and watching the stages? What should be a priority for the guy starting out the first year or two to really try to hone a skill set?
My suggestion to anybody that wants to be a good rifle shooter, whether you're looking at a hunting application or a a match shooting application like, long range stuff, whatever, is obviously to spend time with a training rifle. Okay? I mean, shoot a 22. A 22 will teach you a lot. Now, it used to be, when I was a kid, everybody and his uncle grew up with a 22. I've still got my first 22 rifle. I got it when I was about 8 years old. And Brock has his. He still has his first rifle, which he got when he was about 8 years old. That's the best case scenario. But if you're coming into it as a new shooter, in your 30s, and there are lots of those out there who have decided that, oh man, shooting stuff at 1,000 yards is cooler than blue beans. Let's go do that. Well, those folks are, first of all, they're behind the power curve because they don't have a history of shooting rifles. And the best thing they can do is get out and shoot a 22. Now, the other problem that most people have got is restrictions on where they can shoot. Mm. When I was a kid, I could ride my bike out of town and shoot a rifle. And Brock could literally ride his bike around here and go shoot woodchucks when he was 10, 12 years old. Well, most folks can't do that, so they've got to arrange range time and all that. And I understand that logistically, learning to shoot now in the 21st century is way different than when I started. Yeah. So it's a challenge for a lot of people. But the other thing is, 22 ammo, when you can get it, not right now, 22 ammo is cheap, and it's a great way to start.
Should they start with open sights, or do you think they should try to build something up similar to their match gun?
I'll tell you what, I would recommend highly that anybody who starts shooting, whether it's handgun or rifle, I don't care what it is, starts with open sights. On a rifle, either open sight or a peep sight, even better. And then graduate to a scope after you've got the basics under control, like trigger support, trigger control, and all that. Yeah, I didn't start Brock out with a scope. He started out with open sights.
Caliber selection comes at a price. What do you recommend for shooters? Because there's always the latest and greatest caliber coming onto the market every year. We deal with it in building custom rifles, but for a new shooter starting out, do you have any suggestions on some calibers that they should be looking at and reasons why? Because, you've got guys that think they should have a 338 because they've read that that's the best long-range caliber, and you'll hear this stuff, but what would you recommend from the shooters, what would you recommend from the match director's perspective on this?
Well, at this point in time, with the whole rage of 6mm 6.5s, I would recommend one of those caliber cartridges. Now, the only exception to that would be if you're lucky enough to be in the military, not a special unit, but in the normal military, or in a law enforcement agency. I would shoot whatever they're shooting right now, because you can probably get free ammo. Free is the best price ever on ammunition.
Especially right now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what. I look at our match over the years. We've got a guy who I've known for a long time. He's a judge, actually, of all things, and he's won ASC twice shooting a 308 rifle. Hey. Okay. Now that was before the 6.5 craze, and he actually won a rifle at the match one year, and I think it was a 7 short mag that Terry Cross built. But the reason he won was, he practiced, okay? He shot a 308, and he had a little bit of an edge up because he was a scout sniper in the Corps before he was a judge, okay? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I don't think in the long run that when you're starting out, caliber is incredibly important. But the performance of the 6.5 cartridges is off the chart compared to shooting a 308. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And if you can get one, and if you can get ammo or load for it, you're obviously going to be ahead of the game just in the trajectory department.
From a match director's point of view, what are things that guys could do to make your life easier and safer?
Well, safer, don't point your damn gun at me. I really hate that. And we have had one incident in particular that, quite frankly, I would love to have on video, because I'd completely lost it. But other than that, watch your gun handling. Now, again, most matches are different than ASC. Most matches require range or chamber flags, which we do not. Most matches have one direction of fire for a given firing position where you've shot our match, Jamie.
Mm-hmm.
You know that within an area the size of about 6 parking spaces in several places, we've got people shooting in 3 different directions all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So gun handling is incredibly important, but more so than gun handling is awareness of the condition of your weapon. Okay, and I refer to them as weapons. They're not, that's what they are. They are deadly weapons. And you need to be aware that, of the condition of your rifle at any given time. And I tell people, our only 2 rules, I said, when you're not on the line, I want to see bolts open, or if you're shooting a gas gun, I want to see the bolt lock back. But yeah, I mean, I want to see, and if you see somebody leave the line with a bolt down on a chain, on a round, or even just the bolt down, you tell them, say, hey, dude, pop your bolt, open your bolt. And that guy's response should be, thank you. Okay, no crap, no, like, hey, it's okay, it's unloaded. I don't believe you if you tell me it's unloaded. I know that gun is not capable of firing if the action is open.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, being incredibly aware of the condition of one's weapon is really important. I mean, you're moving around a whole bunch of people, no matter where you are, you're moving around a bunch of people with a deadly weapon, for crying out loud. So you got to be careful. I mean, it's only common sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much more you can add to that other than there's at point blank range, a 308 or a 6.5 Creedmoor, it doesn't matter. You're in really big trouble if you have an accident at those distances with those type of rifles.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, I'm a firm believer that they are not accidents; they are unintentional shootings, is what they are.
Ooh, good way to put it.
You screwed up. It may have been unintentional, but it's still the responsibility of the guy, who's got the gun in his hands. And quite frankly, we all, in other than rare mechanical cases with people with stupid light triggers and stuff like that, it's rare that you can look at a firearms accident and actually call it an accident. It's a screw up.
That's a great way to put it. I think that's the best way I've ever heard it said, to be quite honest with you.
Somebody screwed up. If somebody gets shot, somebody screwed up. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. And they should be held legally responsible.
Yeah.
It's not an accident. I mean, the guns, like I say, except for rare mechanical failures, and that does, I know they do happen, but except you got to pull the trigger, dude.
Yeah.
And if you pulled the trigger and that weapon was pointed at somebody or in the wrong direction, it was your fault, no one else's.
That's right. Speaking of triggers and trigger pull weight, because we run into that here all the time, what are your thoughts on trigger and trigger pull weight?
Well, first of all, you know as well as I do that if your gun will occasionally fire when you put the bolt down on a live round, your trigger's too light.
Yes.
And you've seen guns like that, and so have I. Quite frankly, 2.5, 3 pounds, I can live with a great crisp trigger that's 2.5, 3 pounds on anything.
Right.
I mean, I don't see any reason to get down into that, sub even 1.5 pound, much less sub 1 pound, which some people do. Yeah. Now, if you're sitting at a bench, shooting a bench rest match, that's a whole different deal. But we're talking about field shooting here.
Right.
And, your hands can be cold. You can be cold, wet, covered in snow. I mean, I look at long range shooting more from a practical point of view, same way I do actually with pistol shooting, and I look at these, it's not just a match to me. Okay. I mean, you're preparing for a hunt or whatever by coming to shoot ASC. And a lot of the guys, quite frankly, who come to shoot ASC have done this stuff for real, Yeah. And they know damn well that a 6-ounce trigger ain't the way to go if you're doing it for real.
That's right. Yeah, you get down to that 6 and 4 ounces, especially in a field gun. It's not an accident waiting to happen. It's leaving yourself really vulnerable for it. Oh,
absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, I don't think that, I think you have to be an exceptional, and I mean, I'm talking one in 100,000 exceptional shooter to really benefit from a 10-ounce trigger or an 8-ounce trigger. The average guy out there, quite frankly, can't tell the difference other than the fact when it goes off when it's not supposed to.
It's not going to get him any further up the leaderboard.
Exactly.
What about varmint hunting? So we had a passion. We both share varmint hunting as a passion. I grew up shooting woodchucks here, and there was an organization called the Varmint Hunters Association. You wrote some articles for, and we got a chance to go out and shoot some of their stuff. And we both been out to South Dakota at their headquarters. But my personal thing was with varmint hunting is I thought it was like as a kid was the greatest practice to practical marksmanship on the planet. But what's your take on varmint hunting? And you got to tell guys, share your age and that what you do every summer, because I am so jealous on your practical practicing.
Well, I love shooting varmints. I grew up, actually, I never shot woodchucks or prairie dogs until I was a little older. But I grew up as a kid hunting squirrels with a .22 rifle. Okay, and I think squirrel hunting is one of the grand American pastimes, with a rifle, not with a shotgun. A lot of people hunt them with a shotgun. And I discovered woodchuck shooting probably about the time I was allowed to ride my bicycle more than a few blocks from my home. I grew up on the edge of suburbia and shot woodchucks with a .22 as a kid. And prairie dogs, I did not shoot prairie dogs probably till after I was married. And my wife and I were traveling out west to climb. And I'm going like, holy cow, look at all these prairie dogs in some places. You're going like, that's pretty neat. So we combined climbing and prairie dog shooting. And once I stayed in the climbing business, but quit climbing because of arthritis in my hands and stuff quite a number of years ago. But I love the big country, first of all. I love the American West and the plains. The Great Plains are a wonderful place to spend time, and that's where the prairie dogs are. So I've done that since the 70s, probably, seriously. South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho. I actually shot a little bit in Utah one time. My favorite place of all was a place called Thunder Basin in Wyoming. And Brock and I shot there when he was in high school, actually. And it's one of the few places it's not as good anymore. As a matter of fact, the plague has come and gone there over the years and really decimated the prairie dogs. But Thunder Basin was the first place I ever took Brock where you could honestly, easily have a 500-round day each.
Wow.
And it was unbelievable. And it was much like the Badlands country in South Dakota back in the 70s. If a person drives the loop road through the Badlands National Park and looks south off a lot of those pull-offs, you look down into an area that they call the Kanata Basin. And back in the 70s, everything down there that is now green, and it goes on for miles, everything used to be prairie dog towns. And back then, the government had a poisoning program, and the shooting was wide open. I mean, it was quite different. And now the dogs are only limited in numbers in some places. But you could go into the Kanata Basin country, and if you could hold up to it, physically hold up, you could almost have a 1,000-round day shooting dogs.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but those days are pretty well gone. I mean, nowadays, if you go out and have a 250 to 400-round day, you've really done something. But the beauty of shooting prairie dogs to me is being out in that big country. Like this past year with the COVID and all that stuff, I travel in a pickup truck with a slide-in camper in it, and I spent a month, actually more than a month, out west by myself because the guys I normally link up with did not come out because they're motel and restaurant dependent. But I spent a month out on the prairie, and I shot South Dakota, North Dakota, and Montana, and it was wonderful. I haven't spent that much time with just me and my dog in a long time.
That is awesome.
It was killer, and I didn't even shoot every day. I mean, some days I read a great big book, and on the trip, or I'd go out and shoot in the morning for a couple hours, and then I'd just play with the dog and hang out in the prairie. And you could go days at a time and not see not only a person, but not even a vehicle.
Wow. Now, this is a little off topic, but sort of near and dear. I love to travel, and I'm really looking forward to going out west this next year and even joining up with you to shoot some prairie dogs, because I've never shot a prairie dog, and my highest round count is 12 woodchucks in a day or 13. So for me to even shoot 50 is almost, I'm just having a hard time imagining like how much fun that would be. But when you're out there camping, I'm sure a lot of guys that are listening to this probably are outdoorsmen anyway. You're not staying in like commercial campgrounds. How do you travel out through there, and where do you look for places to stay when you're going out there? Because you go out every year for weeks at a time, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah. Well, it's finding a place to stay in the West is not that big a deal. Sometimes, like in Montana, when we go to Montana to shoot dogs and actually gophers, shooting gophers is more fun than shooting prairie dogs. But in Montana, south of Malta, there's a little campground, a Forest Service campground that's only got 12 sites. It's in a place called Zortman. And Zortman also has a motel where some of my buddies used to stay. So I've stayed there. But east of Zortman, if you drive out onto the prairie east of Zortman, you can go for 40, 50 miles out through there on gravel roads, and it's all BLM land. You can camp anywhere you want. It's not a big deal. Same in South Dakota, like north of, you've been out to the Varmint Hunter place,
Mm-hmm.
and most of South Dakota, like around the Badlands, has got BLM land, which is, again, open to camping. You don't need any permits. You don't need anything. You can just go out there and camp. I've got photographs of my camper taken from a long distance off, and it's just the only thing you see in a sea of green,
And it doesn't cost you anything. You don't.
Not a nickel. It costs you to get there. My suggestion is if you're going to go shoot prairie dogs, though, make sure if you've got a camper or even a little trailer you pull or whatever, be sure you've got plenty of the essentials, which is beef, beans, bullets, and beer. Because if you don't have all of that with you, you're going to get someplace where you want to stay for 3 or 4 days, and you're going to have to get out of there and go to town to get supplies. That's the beauty of having a self-contained camper. You can go like, man, the shooting is so good, I'm not leaving, and you just stay.
Have you ever exposed somebody to varmint hunting that's older, that's never done it before? We try to encourage guys to go out. I mean, I know it sounds silly to have grown men like going out and varmint hunting. Like, well, why would I want to do that? But have you ever exposed people older, not kids, to varmint hunting? And what kind of reactions have you gotten when they got their first taste of it? I mean, what should they be looking for when they get into this?
Well, the only folks I've really done that with are people who have already shot some woodchucks. And like my old college roommate, who's my age, he's in his 70s, and a local guy and his kid, one time I took my old roommate, Bob, and I took this fellow and his son to South Dakota one year, and they went shooting prairie dogs. And that, for a woodchuck shooter, if you really can kind of get into some dogs, and compared to shooting woodchucks, it's pretty easy to get, a lot of shots at prairie dogs. It's a real eye-opener just being able to shoot that much. I mean, even if a guy has a 50 or 100 round day, he's going like, man, I mean, it knocks your socks off. Yeah, the reaction. But what's amazing is how few of them, and I know other folks who have done this. Like I hook up with a bunch of guys from Ohio, and there's one guy, Rick Miller, who's an old-time gun writer. He kind of puts together this group of guys, and they sort of come and go, but there's a core of 3 or 4 of them. But the other folks would come, they'd shoot them once or twice, over the years, and then they disappear. So you either get addicted to it or you don't. And I don't know what the deciding factor is on why some people stick with it and some people don't. Could just be the logistics.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's not in our backyard. You actually have to travel to get there. And you got to share with people. I've been privileged to be in your reloading room, that you don't take ammo by the box. What is your prairie dog ammo reloaded and filled in?
What do I put it in?
Yeah, when you go out there, you don't go out with like a little can of ammunition. Share with the folks what your ammunition goes out in, how much you have.
I load my main prairie dog round. I shoot .223, and I've got. I'm fortunate. I have way more .223 rifles than I should ever have, but I load .223 on a Dillon 550 that I specifically have set up for that, with a Hornady powder measure on it. By the way, not a Dillon measure, but the Hornady is smoother. That's what I can say. But when I go west to shoot prairie dogs, my ammunition is packed in bulk, not in little boxes, in 50 caliber cans. That's how I take my ammo out there. And I've usually got at least 2 50 caliber cans of 223, usually more, and then I've got other assorted stuff in assorted other cans. Just depends on what rifles I decide to take. I mean, I've taken everything from a Hornet, 22 Hornet, to 17 Fireball. It just depends. I shoot a lot of rimfire. I shoot a lot of all things, the 17 Mach 2, not the 17 HMR, but I love shooting the 17 Mach 2, and mainly I use that on gophers, which are Richardson's ground squirrels. And you find those up north in Montana a lot, up near the Canadian border. The gopher shooting is really, really good, and it's really fun, and it's not long range. Long range is 100 yards, 150 yards. And the beauty of it is you don't have to reload.
The varmint hunting side of it, how do you think, like, I always said the varmint hunting side really helped you prep up for whether it was a match or even big game hunting, because, I mean, you're shooting it out there in all of those conditions and the different winds. And let's face it, if you can hit a woodchuck or a ground squirrel or a prairie dog at 350 yards, an elk actually is just that much easier.
Oh, absolutely. And when my son first went to Wyoming to work as a guide, this is quite a number of years ago, he spent 4 or 5 years out there, as you know, guiding elk hunters and mule deer hunters, and they killed a couple of moose and some sheep anyway. But I told Brock, I said, listen, when you guys go to the airport to pick up your clients and you're riding back to the trailhead in the truck, I said, if you want to make your life easy, I said, talk to those guys and find out who the varmint shooters are. I said, because if nothing else, those guys probably know how to shoot and shoot more than other people, you know?
Yeah.
So they'll be ahead of the game rather than the guy who, goes to the rifle range and sits at the bench twice a year and launches a few bullets, whatever. Yeah. Because varmint hunters, no matter, even a casual woodchuck shooter will shoot more rounds in a year than most folks.
Yes. I think personally speaking, some of the best shooters that I've ever met or have known were varmint hunters or are varmint hunters or grew up varmint hunting, and just had that much more time in the field shooting.
Well, that and time behind the gun. I mean, shooting is a perishable skill. And first of all, I'm a firm believer that the earlier you start, the more ahead of the power curve you are. But the longer, the longer you've been at it, and the more you do it. I mean, the more times you pull that trigger, assuming you're doing it right, the better off you are. You should be learning with every shot.
Yeah, the most confident I've ever been in shooting is probably the years I spent so much more time out varminting all summer long and as late as you could, and that then it's like in the fall you're going out deer hunting, or we went out on an elk hunt, and it was just like your confidence was through the roof. You really felt good about the shots and shooting.
Yeah, well, you get to the point, if you know as well as I do, and it doesn't matter whether you're a small bore shooter who shoots. I mean, small bore shooters shoot a lot of ammo, 22 ammo. But if you've got in multiple hundreds or thousands of repetitions doing anything, it becomes more or less automatic. And it's like you talking about your elk hunt. If you've shot a pile of woodchucks, so the actual shot on the elk was probably anticlimactic. Yeah, you're shooting at something the size of a small cooler, really, and you're going, okay, there's the elk, bam, and that's the shot itself was. I bet you didn't even think about it.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. You nailed it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything. It's like driving a car. You don't think about driving the car, getting in there, putting your foot on the brake and kicking it and driving, going down the road. You've done it for so long, it's just purely. It's an automatic reflex, and if you shoot enough, that the actual shooting part becomes almost automatic. It's like one of my back to the match thing. Just as an aside, one of my real pet peeves, and you can tell the folks who have not spent lots of time behind a rifle on our match, because they can't find targets. Okay. You'll be sitting I'll be sitting in a chair with my spotting scope, and the guy will go, "Where's the target?" I'll go, "It's right down there. You see it?" They'll go, "Oh yeah, that orange spot." And I go, "Yep, that's it." And the target will be out, say 500-700 yards or something. Well, they get down behind the gun and they've not spent enough time behind a rifle to get squared away and set up so they can automatically get on that target. They've got to hunt for it. So they dial the power down and they jack around and they finally find it and then they run the power back up and then they lose it and they can't get back on it again. You know, you should be able to, if you can see a target, you should be able to look over the rifle, see the target, and go down on the scope and be on the target most of the time.
That's right.
And you know exactly what I'm talking about.
That's a problem, and it takes some of the fun out of the match for the shooter.
Well, that and people get really frustrated, you know. I mean, they'll go, well, I can't see it. And I go, dude, that's not my problem, you know. I mean, it's right there. I mean, I can see it, you know. So, yeah, and that purely comes from spending time behind a gun. You know, you don't gain that ability to get on target and quickly and efficiently by going to the range once a month or whatever, or sitting down and shooting from a bench, punching holes in paper. You know, that's where the varmint hunting thing comes in, can be really valuable to the guy shooting a match, because you've hunted, you know, you've been out in the field, you had to get on little targets at distance. That's what it's all about. Yeah.
From the match director's point of view, what are some things that guys can do to make your life better? To make your life better as a match director or running stages, because, you know, I think as shooters we often forget that there are people working that aren't getting a chance to shoot for days on end to make this possible for those that are participating. And just, you know, I always look at it like, what can I do to try to make their life a little bit easier, or to let them have as much fun as we're having, because it's a lot of work and responsibility on your ends. But what are some things that guys could do to keep in mind the match directors and the people that are running it, to make their lives easier, to make it run better, to make it enjoyable for you?
Well, you know, you wouldn't run a match if you didn't enjoy shooting sports in general, first of all. But you're right, it is work. One of the biggest things that I think people can do is offer to chip in and help, especially like a long-range match where we might have one guy at each of seven different shots, you know, throughout a morning. You follow me? On a spotter. Mm-hmm. Offer to help. Say, hey, dude, let me sit and spot for a while. Stuff like that. The other thing that can make life simpler for us is to keep moving. Okay, people don't realize how much time it takes to run X number of people on one stage of a match. So they'll fire their shot, and their buddy will fire their shot, and they'll stand around and yak it up and whatever. You know, they need to be responsible enough to go, you know, this whole thing is going to take forever if we don't get moving. So, you know, they need to take some initiative and go, hey, like, let's, you know, where do we need to go now? What's next? And be able to, you know, try to keep the whole thing moving along.
Yeah.
Now, again, our match is different because we do kind of a round robin thing where you go from one spot to another and there's somebody there waiting on you. But yeah, I mean, yeah, just being efficient, getting your shot off, get your shit packed up and get down the road into the next shot. I mean, you know, that's an incredibly big help.
Is there anything else as far as from the safety perspective that you like to see, or something that you see a shooter do that you sort of tilt your hat toward and say, well, that was really squared away with what that guy just did, you know, because you get to watch 80 people cycle through stages all the time, and how all of them handle the rifles differently and how they all approach the target differently. So anything like that you see that catches your attention, that, you know, giving you the signal that he's squared away?
You know, you can watch, and you know, you've been involved in training obviously for a while. You can watch most folks and tell whether they're comfortable with what they're doing, you know, and confident with what they're doing. I know, like when I was working at hunting camp, where we worked at the same camp where my son worked, except at a different time, my wife and I did. And we would take people first day, before we even went into camp at the trailhead, take them over to a makeshift bench rest and check the zero on their rifles. And I loved it when you could had some guy, first of all, whipped out an old beat up Model 70 in 270 or something like that. You're going like, that's a pretty cool rifle. That thing's been around. You know, he said, what do you want me to do? And you go, target at 100 yards. I want you to put a shot on that for me, if you would, please. And the guy just loads it up, I mean, you can tell he doesn't have to think about what he's doing. But bolt comes open, he stuffs a couple rounds in the gun, closes the bolt, sits down, and just fires a shot. And when the gun goes bang, what's he do? He works the bolt and loads another round. And it's like my buddy Ken Hackathorn said for years, and I've used the line a lot. The firing stroke is not complete until you've reloaded your weapon. Okay? It's a sign of experience and a sign of efficiency. The gun goes bang, you follow through, and you reload the weapon. And the guy goes, "You want another shot?" And I go, "No, dude, that'll do." You follow me?
Yeah.
And you can see, and you see the same thing, and you see the same thing at matches. Even if a second shot is not required, you can tell the military guys and a lot of times the LE guys, because that gun will go bang, they follow through, and they work the bolt, and they're ready for a second shot if need be.
Yeah, with their face on the gun while they're looking at the target.
Exactly. They're not coming off the gun. They're down there ready for another shot if they need to fire a shot. And it's a matter of experience and being efficient, you know. So, you know, that kind of thing tips you off. I mean, but general gun handling, you know, you can watch somebody, you know, how they get their magazine in the gun. And again, you know, that's a pet peeve of mine. I do not like detachable box magazines in bolt guns. But, you know, you watch them put the mag in, how they get that first round out of that magazine. A lot of them feed kind of glitchy, so they tend to baby them instead of whacking the bolt and getting the round in the gun.
Right.
You know, I mean, you've seen it. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh,
and you can watch a person and go, you know what, that dude's squared away. I'm really not going to have to pay attention to him for the rest of the match.
Yeah, it eases some of the burden from you from having to watch one less person, or at least babysit.
Exactly. And people should strive to be that guy who comes across as being competent and efficient and safe, you know?
Yeah. And as far as the last thing when it comes to the guys prepping for the match, how about clothing and environment? You spend as much time outdoors as most people that I know, or more. So what advice do you give guys? Because you see it at matches, we see it at different things in hunting, clothing, and just prepping for the environment they're going to be in. What do you see at matches, and what advice would you give guys?
Well, you can't put it on if you don't have it with you. Okay? Clothing. And the first thing is good rain gear. I mean, I don't care if the forecast is for sunny and bright weather for our match for 3 days. I take rain gear. You got to have rain gear. You got to stay as dry as you can, and good rain gear. And that, and just, you know, have some extra stuff, you know. I mean, that's a little bit of clothing, like a puffy jacket or something like that, is the lightest thing you're probably going to carry, but can certainly give you more comfort if the weather should turn to crap, which it can in the mountains, especially whether you're hunting or shooting a match. You know, have some extra clothing along with you. It can make a huge difference. I'm quite frankly a big fan personally of having a wool scarf or a pile scarf and gloves. Yeah. I mean, I've always carried that. People go, "You carry a scarf?" I go, "You bet. I can wrap my head up in it. I can wrap it around my neck." And and I got to admit, my hands get cold. I mean, I don't mind putting on gloves in the springtime when it goes in, you know, maybe down to 40 degrees even. I'll put on a pair of gloves. You know, I'm not too macho to do that.
I think what we ought to do, John, is maybe later on in the year, especially if we get a chance to come down, we're going to be doing the King of the Mountain, and maybe try to take a trip down. Seneca Rocks, I think, is probably one of the nicest areas that I've been to, whether it's a motorcycle ride or all kinds of beautiful things to see down that way. But we'll try to bring you back on and maybe talk some more about just the shooting aspects of it. But any other advice you would like to give, or any final thoughts or food for thought you'd like to throw out there?
For new match shooters?
Yeah, for new match shooters.
Well, the best advice I can give them is spend enough time with your gear that you understand what you need and what you don't need, and get rid of the junk that you hardly ever use. That, and the other thing is, to be honest with you, I know everybody's on a budget, but buy quality gear the first time. I mean, there's nothing's going to hinder you more than trying to cut costs on an optic or even a rifle. Now, granted, PRS and those people have got factory categories now. You can shoot a Ruger Precision or a Savage or whatever. And actually, a lot of guys do pretty well with those in, even in open competition, I guess. But the bottom line is, if you buy the best gear you can get, that's the one thing you can eliminate. There's stuff you don't have to worry about. Mm-hmm. That and quite frankly, no matter what you buy, make sure it works before you go to the match.
Ooh.
I mean, you have no idea how often you'll see a guy show up at a match with a rifle that won't feed reliably.
Or a hunting trip.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, shoot the thing enough to know that it works and to be comfortable with it. And some rifles have got quirks that you can get by with. We had a multi-shot stage that we used to do. The trees grew up too much. We can't do it anymore. But it was like a 5-shot string on 5 different targets at different ranges, shot over a great big rock on the upper side of a road. Well, we had a guy one year, and I'm sitting there running that, and the buzzer goes off, and I hadn't been paying any attention. Well, he sat there and ran his rifle as a single shot, loading 1 round at a time. And I'm going like, whoa! And he did it really well, and probably faster than 3/4 of the people that were there. And I said, dude, what's with loading the rifle single shot? He goes, he said, this thing's never fed. He says, when I shoot something like this, I always load it single shot, and I do just fine. I think he knew what the gun would do, and he knew how to solve the problem, and he did it really well. That's the kind of stuff you like to see, instead of a guy that fiddles around trying to get a piece of crap that doesn't work and doing it in a match, which frustrates him and everybody else.
Yeah. It makes a big difference for how they enjoy the match as well as how it runs for you as well.
Oh, absolutely. Well, there's nothing worse than going to a shooting event, and I've shot practical pistol and I shot small bore rifle all through college, and but there's nothing worse than having a gun that doesn't work. Yeah. And you'd be surprised how many people have guns and ammo combos that don't work. I mean, it's really, to me, incredible. I mean, there's a reason they have gun shows. You take that crap to the gun show and get rid of it.
It's a good thing to do. Well, John, thank you so much for taking all the time for coming on to the podcast here. I really do appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to bringing you back on. We're going to have to do this again, maybe on the shooting subject, but thank you so much for taking the time to join us here.
My pleasure. And come on down and shoot with us some afternoon when the weather gets nice.
You got it. Can't wait to join you out west shooting prairie dogs this year coming up.
Well, let's hope we make that work and hope the COVID thing calms down, huh?
You betcha. Thanks, John.
All right. Good deal, Jamie. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, there you go. A great interview with Mr. John Markwell. John, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast here and sharing your experience with everybody. I always enjoy coming down and spending time with you on the mountain, and looking forward to joining you for some prairie dogs. Now, as promised, stick around to the end here because we've got a great giveaway coming up for New Year's Eve. A couple of things to touch base on before we get to that. We've got some great interviews scheduled for next year, and we're going to continue on this theme of preparing for the match. So we've got a couple great guests scheduled for next year, and I think some of the names you will recognize and some great people that are worth taking the time to talk to. So we're really grateful that we've got some really good people coming up that we're going to be interviewing, trying to help you get prepared for the match or hunt of a lifetime. I would like to give a quick shout out to Trigger Tech. We talked about that here during this podcast. You heard John bring it up about pull weight, and triggers really do make a huge difference. If you have a good quality gun, having a good quality trigger means the world. That's predictable, that's reliable, and of course we use Trigger Tech triggers. So we do like to thank Trigger Tech for being part of the show here, and we always tell everybody, if you're going to take the time to replace your trigger, why not put the best in it? And we believe that is Trigger Tech. So stop over to triggertech.com. That is triggertech.com today, and pick out your favorite trigger for your new rifle. All right, so leading up to the giveaway here, one of the things that I would like to say that is we managed to finish our installation video preparing to install the Ace. So if you head over to the website or you go to our YouTube channel, you will see that we have several rifle building videos up, and with the newest one being installing the Ace. So we just finished and released it. It is on our website under our custom rifle building page, or you can go over to our YouTube page and see it there. It is a complete guide to the installation of the Ace and how to build and maintain your own rifle. So to go right along with what we produced in the video of assembling the Ace. So like I said, you can go over to our YouTube channel, or you can go over to our website at wolfprecision.net and you can see the video there. But we built a 6.5 by 47 Lapua with a 6.5 by 47 Ace and Krieger barrel. So the giveaway that we are giving away New Year's Eve is the actual barrel and chamber that we assembled in that video. So if you would like to register to win a free barrel and a free Ace, stop over to our Facebook page, tag 3 people to the link for the free giveaway, go over to our YouTube page, follow us on YouTube, and you are in the running. We will substitute a 6.5 Creedmoor for the 6.5 by 47 Lapua. If you do not reload and you would like to shoot the Creedmoor instead, we will gladly do that. But we are going to be giving that away next week on New Year's Eve. The winner will be announced at 5 o'clock, so don't forget to register. It's at Facebook, and as well as go over to our YouTube page and follow us on YouTube. So I hope everybody has a great Christmas. It is the end of 2020. We are really looking forward to the 2021 shooting season. We're really hoping to get out to some of the matches and events and spend some time on the range, since a lot of the gun shows and events that we normally go to in the spring have been or will be canceled. So we hope to see lots of you guys around the country. We are getting all set up to hit the road. We have a Jeep Rubicon that we're building up. It's a diesel. We have a Schutz trailer, American-made, that will have my rooftop tent and some other equipment on it, and we plan on doing some trips clean across the United States and attending some of the different matches and events. So we'll post up and send out some updates as to what shows and events and matches we're going to get to, and we're looking forward to you there. We like to camp, so if there's any camping around in the area, or if you can camp right there at the match or event, we will be there joining you. We'll post some pictures up of our new overland rig, I guess you would say, up on our Facebook page as soon as she gets together. So we're looking forward to spending some time on the road, driving across the country and meeting as many of you as possible at some of the different shoots and events, as well as participating in some of the matches. It's something that I haven't been able to do in a while, just growing and working with the business. And so this year we're going to take some time off, travel, and try to come out and meet as many of you as we can. So I hope everybody has a great Christmas. I hope 2021 turns out to be the best year ever as far as everybody being healthy and sort of getting back to a normalcy of living our lives, and looking forward to meeting some of you at some of the different matches and events coming up in 2021. So thank you all very much for taking the time to join us here at the show. We really do appreciate it. My name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host, and you're listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.